Hey guys, welcome back to the Man That Can Project podcast. I'm super excited today. This topic is really rare, and I know you guys are going to get a lot of value from it. There's probably a heap of you who are sitting back being like, this is something that I've always wanted to learn about, something I've always got questions on, because I know when I was fortunate enough, Cam and I touched base a couple of weeks ago, and he told me what he did and how he's gone about it. I literally, and I was telling Cam this earlier, I've been talking to a few of my clients in the previous couple of days, and I know it's something that has been popping up on podcasts with Aubrey Marcus and stuff like that, just around men's sexual health and sex coaching and and we're going to learn more from Cam now. But so Cam, joining us from Perth, has an incredible beard, which I'm jealous of, but he's also a certified sexologist, which we're going to learn more about what exactly that is, a sex coach and a tantric yoga teacher. So although he's specializing in men's sexual health, he also teaches all-inclusive workshops and courses, as well as working with people one-on-one. And some of the stuff that we've had a bit of a chat about already, I know you guys are going to get immense value through, based around, mindfulness, environment, anxiety and stuff like that. So Cam's work integrates scientifically validated and medically accurate information with esoteric teachings from mystery tradition. So I, like a lot of you guys, am going to learn a heap out of this podcast as well. So guys, tune on in. Over to you, Cam. I'd love to hear, first of all, more about how you got to where you are right now. What's the journey been like for you?
Yeah, thanks for having me on as well, by the way, man. Really appreciate the time you're taking to really dive deep into this. I guess a little bit of my story starts in America. Actually, I went to the States to study psychology, and I used to play competitive soccer as well. So I got a scholarship to go over to the States and play and study at the same time, which is pretty amazing.
Awesome.
Unfortunately, through playing sports, heavily injured my spine, my lower back, and had to do some pretty intense rehab. And as part of the rehab, I was introduced to Pilates and yoga, and started to see this really nice connection between the psychology that I was studying and the yoga that I was practicing, and how psychology was all talk therapy based and yoga was all body somatic based. And yeah, the space that I was in the States, I was in a little community in rural Georgia. So if anyone knows anything about the States, Georgia's like smack bang in the middle of the Bible Belt, the deep conservative South. And the thing that I noticed the most over there was the sexual repression and the sexual oppression as well. So there was a lot of guilt and shame and anxiety and fear associated with anything to do with sexual expression, really. So so it was very confronting for me. And studying psych and practicing yoga, and coming from Australia, having a bit of a different background, could kind of see things playing out in front of me with regards to how detrimental this lack of sexual health and sexual expression was. So that's kind of what sparked this idea of using yoga to move the body and get in touch with the body, and using psychology to start to explore sexuality in terms of the mental and emotional concepts. And then I just started traveling, did a whole bunch of things in South America, some plant medicine, went over to Thailand, ordained as a monk, Buddhist monk, traveled through Southeast Asia, went back to America, and then eventually made my way to India and then to Australia. And that travel kind of opened me up to things like Tantra, things like sacred sexuality. So this whole world of sexual liberation and sexual expression that I hadn't really known about until I started traveling. And I was, something that I think I'm quite good at is integrating a lot of these things together. So I started putting all these pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together, trying to identify what was at the center of it, specifically for me, but then also for people as well. And so I stepped into, when I got back to Perth eventually, I stepped into the sexology degree here at a place called Curtin University, and have been making my way through that. And the opportunity presented itself for me to start working with people one-on-one, because I was just open about was just open about sex, really. I was just talking about my own sexual journey, talking about what I'd been observing and what I think, is beneficial and what's worked for me and what I think might work for other people. And was just putting it out into the world. And people started like paying attention. People that I, hadn't spoken to for years and years and years started asking me questions saying, hey, do I have this problem? Can you help me with this, or what it might be? And yes, I just got inundated with people asking me questions, and I thought, I've got to start, scheduling in times to work with people, because I can't just give them an offhanded comment and do a disservice not only to them but a disservice to the information that I've and the wisdom that I've kind of cultivated. So I set up a little practice, just a home office practice, as you see behind me, and started seeing people one-on-one as a sex coach. I have a background in counselling and some other mental health modalities, but the coaching aspect for me was allowed a bit more freedom in terms of the way that I can work with my clients. So counselling, for example, was a bit more talk therapy based. It was a bit more focused in the past. It was a bit more of a maintenance, kind of weekly maintenance thing, whereas coaching, for me at least, was a bit more goal oriented, a bit more future oriented. And I guess when I started working with clients, saw a lot more progression with coaching rather than counselling. So made that decision to step into the coaching field. And was teaching yoga and practicing yoga as well. So integrating that into the things that I do and the workshops that I teach. And it's just it's kind of blossomed since then, man. It's been about a year that I've been doing this privately, one-on-one. I've been teaching yoga for a couple of years now, and it's just starting to really take flight, because people are starting to recognize how important their sexuality and sexual health and sexual enjoyment is in their lives.
There's so many questions I've got even just from that. So thanks for sharing that. It's something we definitely see. And I was only having this conversation yesterday afternoon because I was telling someone I was, psyched about having you on the show. We work on all these other aspects, and we openly talk about, physical health, mental. More people are talking about mental health, but sexual health is always like shunned. It's like, I remember with the guys, and you probably experienced this, growing up playing team sport, like you'd always talk about, times with girls and stuff, but you never actually ask the questions on how to get better. It's like, we just wake up and think we're good at this sort of stuff, or we should understand all of it, but it's like, no one has a conversation. So for yourself, like, do you ever deal with it, like, obviously with your clients, like sex addicts, or people that feel they're a sex addict? Like, is that a common thing, especially for men? Because I know a lot of men are just like, every time I hear it come about, most people are like, oh, you're just male, or females like, oh, they're just male.
Yeah, I definitely have a couple of people that I see, and it's kind of, I guess, with regards to the addictive mentality to sexuality, the men that I've worked with that maybe have a bit more of a compulsive tendency, it's not necessarily towards like sex with other people, but it's just a tendency towards like sexuality and just sexual expression. So that more often than not comes out as like really regular masturbation and really regular porn watching, and then obviously it branches off if they've got the opportunity to then go and sleep with someone, then it manifests that as well. But it's not the easiest thing to just go out and sleep with someone, unless it's sex worker or something. But the compulsion is there to express something sexual, and so that manifests a lot as really compulsive porn viewing, lots of masturbation, just unhealthy touch and unhealthy like self-story and self-narrative around their sexuality as well. So and that it stems, I mean, my kind of observation is that idea of sexually expressing oneself in that unhealthy way comes from the unhealthy kind of story that we've built up around male sexual expression, right? The kind of cultural narrative at the moment is that male sexual energy is quite predatory, and that that's in social media we kind of see this a lot, and even in popular media, the male or the masculine sexual energy is the predator, right? Is the violator, and that's kind of what men are absorbing, right? That's what the masculine is absorbing, this idea that their sexual expression is something to be afraid of, right? Something to be scared of.
Yeah.
And kind of the reason why that connection has been made is because, like you said, no one's told us how to express ourselves sexually, like appropriately or in a way that's good for us, in a way that's good for the people that we're attracted to. Like no one's given us a sit down and a talk and said, look, this is, I don't want to black and white it, but this is wrong and this is right, or this is what you should be doing, this is what you shouldn't be doing. But no one's really had that conversation with us. So I certainly never got it, and I know lots of men in my circle of friends never got it as well. Something we've had to kind of figure out on our own. But so we've got this kind of two-pronged thing happening of us being told that male sexuality is kind of overt and too sexual, and it's unhealthy, and also this other end of being like, well, no one's talking about it, so you don't have any. There's no option. That's just the normal. That's just what happens, Yep. So so conversation needs to be had around mixing up those two things and kind of challenging them a bit.
So when you say sexual expression, like what does that actually mean? Because when I think about it, I just think like having sex with a partner, and I'm sure it's probably heaps bigger than that. So what does that actually mean for everyone listening?
Yeah, so I guess for me, sexual expression is really anything that expresses you sexually, right? So for example, it could be having sex with someone, but it could also be so I hate the word masturbation, but it could be your self-pleasuring as well. So how you give yourself pleasure. It could be how you express yourself. It doesn't have to be sex with a partner. It could be any type of interaction with a partner. It could be flirting. It could be dating. It could be a long-term relationship. There's still elements of expressing yourself sexually in those scenarios. It could be introducing yourself to someone for the first time. The whole pickup scene as well, which is a whole different story, but that's a way of expressing yourself sexually. And so that it does encompass quite a lot. And when we think about it, like I like to use this kind of analogy of the way that we have sex is the way that we do life. So the way that we fuck is the way that we live, essentially, right? And so if we're stuck in a rut, or if we're not fully expressing ourselves sexually, then we're not fully expressing ourselves in life as well, right? We're not fully expressing ourselves in the rest of our totality. And I'd even go so far as to say the way that you self-pleasure, the way that you masturbate is the way that you have sex. And so the way that you self-love as well, the way that you self-touch, the way that you pleasure yourself leads into your whole life.
That's so interesting. That's a great analogy. I like it. It's a good. I've never actually thought about that, but that's super, super interesting. Before, when you were saying sacred sexuality, like what is this? What does that mean?
Yeah, so that term sacred sexuality gets thrown around quite a lot. I'll offer up, I guess, my definition, and it's really sacred sexuality to me is like bringing some respect, some reverence, some integrity back into what I was just talking about, sexual expression. Yep. So like we can sexually express in a really unhealthy way, in a really unconscious way. Some examples that pop up straight away is like stalking, is like the catcalling and stuff like that to women.
Yep.
But if we start to bring some reverence and some respect and some honor and some integrity into our sexuality and our sexual expression, we start to develop this thing that we like to call sacred sexuality, which is treating sexuality as something that is sacred. As if we look at the yogic and tantric traditions, there's this idea that sexual energy is creative energy, is life-giving energy, and that if our sexual energy kind of ceases to exist, then we also cease to exist, right? Because we can't create the next moment of our life. We can't. We don't have life energy left to kind of utilize. So, just treating sexual energy or our sexuality as something that is something to be revered, and not squandering it, not wasting it, not disrespecting it, not using it to overpower, not using it to cultivate negativity, for want of a better word. It's just kind of reframing sex as something positive and as something healthy, and then developing ways to kind of manifest that.
That's insane. That's awesome. How do you go about, like, because I know there's going to be a heap of people, lads especially, listening. They're like, I want to know more. Like, what does it involve? Like, how do I, like, reach out or find obviously we're talking to you and they can reach out to you. Like, what will they gain by going to you? Because I know there's a lot of dudes who are going to be fearful as all hell about approaching this topic, because like you said, it is something that's just undercover. It's like you go home and that's when you might have this sex conversation. It's never something that's openly spoken about, unless, in my experience, it's been, quite degrading. Because obviously growing up in the rugby culture, it's been quite degrading towards women and stuff. Like, that's the only time you'll really openly talk about it. So how do you feel we can help men move forward to, one, not seek help, but like get more educated on it, become better at all of the things based around it, especially the sacred sexuality? Like, how do you reckon we start that process?
Yeah, it's something that I've been, exploring and trying to navigate that situation myself. Obviously, coming from a sporting background as well, definitely resonate with the pretty misogynist, unhealthy locker room banter. Of it can be pretty disrespectful to women, and also pretty disrespectful to our own sexuality as well. Pretty one-sided. So yeah, I guess the way forward I see is like starting to normalize conversations around pleasure, for one. It's like there's this like idea that like men's sexual pleasure is not as important as female sexual pleasure, especially in like the heterosexual relationships. Yep. So like, and this goes back into the locker room talks, I suppose, to use that example. It's always like, oh, I made her come, or she groaned this much, or she squealed this much. And it's always focused on like how well you did to make her experience pleasure. It's never like, oh, I felt so good, or she made me feel so good. I had such a great time. It's always, focused on the female for starters. So, which is great. And in the ideal world, that's very noble as well, to want to give pleasure to your partner. But the reframe that I suggest is like taking ownership of your own pleasure, right? And that goes for in a heterosexual relationship, both the man and the woman. The woman's responsible for her sexual pleasure, and the man's responsible for his sexual pleasure. So I guess starting to normalize that, starting to be like, you know what, it feels good when I have sex. It feels good when I self-pleasure as well. Like, I'm not ashamed of that. We turn, especially guys, man, and especially Australian guys, we turn masturbation and self-pleasure into this big joke of like, oh, I'm gonna go have a wank, or I'm gonna go, rip one off or whatever. It's just like, it's just it becomes the butt of all our jokes. So it's like starting to normalize the fact that like self-touch and self-pleasure is okay. Because if it doesn't start with ourselves, then it's not going to start manifesting in the collective, right? In the cultural narrative. We've got to start being comfortable here before we start being comfortable kind of out there.
It's so interesting. Even as you're saying some of this stuff, like, I feel uncomfortable in terms of like, I can't believe this conversation's happening. And like, I consider myself to be fairly self-aware, and even I'm picking it up, I'm like, this is odd for me. Like, it's interesting. Like, I'm loving talking about this, but I can't imagine how many other people are like, why the fuck are they openly talking about this? But I think it's like, we need to have more conversations like this. It has to be normal. I feel it needs to be. Like, it's just another extension of who we are.
And I think like we're so limiting ourselves, man. Like male sexual expression in terms of like having sex is like, oh, a couple of pumps and come and you're finished, right? And it's like, oh, is that fucking it? Like, is that all we've got to live for? Is that all we can fucking achieve? And all this stuff's being done for women around experiencing multiple orgasms, full body orgasms. Like, I'm sure some of the guys listening as well will be like, oh, it seems like the woman I'm having sex with is having such a great time. I'm just kind of coming and finishing, and that's about it, And it's and I think guys are kind of waking up to the fact that there's like more to it, and that there's more to experience, and that it doesn't have to just be this like, jackhammer, pumping away until you're finished and like that's kind of it, all over and have a smoke and go to sleep, which is kind of what we've lived in for such a long time. So I think as guys become kind of more aware of that, they're starting to realize, or the conversation I think comes a little bit more easier, because they're like, what else is there? What else is going on for me? Like, what else can I experience? So that's something that I work on with the guys who come see me as well, is kind of doing a bit of education around the other types of orgasm that men can experience, how to have full body orgasms, how to refrain from ejaculation as well. So that, a lot of stuff that I do is around premature ejaculation for guys.
Yep.
They're comfortable with how long it's taking them for them to come. They want to last longer.
Yep.
They want, again, it's kind of framed as I want to please my partner more, but lasting longer is going to make you feel good as well. It's going to make you experience more pleasure. So I think as long as there's kind of that reframe happening, guys are going to become more and more aware of it, and the conversation is going to become easier.
And then it's just going to be like that whole compounding effect. Once it's starting to happen in your life, the more you talk about it, the more you're going to learn and the more you're going to experience, and it's just going to erupt, so to speak.
Yeah, big time.
Which is cool. So going like, how did you actually, like when you said you studied the degree, I didn't even know there was a degree. How did you find it? Like how did it become a thing?
Well, there's only like a couple of like really well-known degrees in the world. One's at La Trobe University in Melbourne. There's a couple over in the States, and just lo and behold, one happened to be here in Perth. So I was super interested in studying sexuality, human sexuality, I suppose, in like a clinical academic setting. So I did a whole bunch of research and found a couple of good courses that I could do. There's a couple online as well. So if anyone's interested, I can always they can reach out and I can give them information. But so I really love academics, and it's something I've really held on to throughout my life, studying 2 degrees and then pursuing postgrad and other diplomas. Just something that really resonates with me. So I wanted to pursue the sexuality side of things quite academically as well. And I really love, although I don't use it often, I love like psychotherapeutic techniques like Gestalt therapy and CBT and ACT and all that sort of stuff. So it scratches my academic mind, and that's what I really appreciate. And then all the yoga and all the tantra stuff starts to like scratch my esoteric kind of mystery tradition kind of feeling that I've got in my heart as well. So for me, it was a nice balance. That's
awesome. How do you, and I know there's a lot of guys where I was, and you were probably there as well, where you look at yoga and you're like, nah, not a chance of doing that. How did you go from like being a high level football player or soccer player in Australia to then getting into that field? Like, did you ever have any like hang ups on yoga and all that spirituality and stuff like that as well? Or did you just always believe in that sort of stuff?
I definitely had some like reservations around yoga, reservations around like the spirituality scene. Like I was saying, the push that I had to yoga was through an injury that I did to my back, my lower back. So I was doing Pilates first as recovery, and then got suggested to do yoga as well, just to kind of speed up the process. And it was kind of through like that first initial step into yoga. I was doing yoga to achieve like better soccer or to achieve recovery. I was like using it as an ends to a means. It was like through the practice of doing it that slowing my breath down, noticing and becoming more aware of the things happening in my body, that I was like, holy shit, I'm getting so much more out of this. I was like starting to become aware of what I was feeling, like sensation wise. So like, I was loosening up my lower back. I was loosening up my hips and my pelvis. So like I wasn't so tight around my glutes, wasn't so tight around my hips. So then whenever I was sexual with a woman, I was able to feel more, I was able to experience more, I was able to last longer because I wasn't so tight. So I had all these like pretty immediate benefits for me, and I was like, oh my God, this is blowing my mind. Like, what the hell is going on? And so that kind of opened the door then to kind of understand a little bit more about the body, and so that opened me into yoga a little bit deeper, and then the meditation came through, and then stuff Buddhism and Taoism started popping up for me. And I slowly it wasn't overnight for sure, but over a good year, I'd made this transition from like being really competitive in the world of soccer to being like really competitive in the world of yoga. And I was like, I'm going to be the best yoga teacher I can be. I'm going to be the best fucking student I can be. So I tapped into that like competitiveness from the sport that I was playing into like, I'm going to be the best spiritual, person that I can be, and started diving deep into all these other things as well. So it was a combination of like loving to learn, which is something that I've held on for my whole life, and then this competitiveness as well, to just kind of like just research and engulf as much information as I could, because I saw the benefits in it, and yeah, so now I've made that full jump into the spirituality and sexuality world. That's
awesome. So it's really just, and I was going to mention this before, like before people throw off at some of the stuff that you're trying and experiencing. I would have done this 5 years ago, but now I'm always like, I'm open to trying anything, because until I've experienced it for myself, you can't comment. I don't feel you have the right to comment. You can be like, this is woo bullshit or da 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 da, but it's like, it could be something that can completely transform your life, whether it's the yoga, it's the sexual expression, all that sort of stuff has the ability to take who you are to the next level. And I know for a fact there'll be a lot of guys listening to this being like, nah. But most of those guys who are shaking their head are probably the guys that need to go, let's just try it. Like, I need to enhance this aspect of my life.
And like the yoga was what worked for me, and I'm not here to start harping on about the benefits of yoga. That was just kind of my experience, my journey, and I saw so much benefit in it. Like, there's so many other modalities or so many other practices that you can do out there. Like, even just stretching for like 10 minutes a day, there's nothing wrong with it. If we just call yoga stretching, guys would be like, oh yeah, fucking I can stretch, no worries.
Yeah, exactly.
We start emphasizing the benefits of it, of like, look, if you want to last longer in bed, do some stretching, right? I guarantee you that'll start to help. Right? That's a real basic fundamental thing that I tell all the guys that have premature ejaculation issues is, if you want to last longer, just start to do some hip openers, mate. That's like the most basic thing that I can start telling people to do. But there's so many other things out there, like it doesn't have to be yoga. They just happen to be my journey. But starting to do a little bit of like, especially developing a bit of awareness of your body, you're going to start to see benefits like straight away.
That's awesome. That's hip openers. Thanks. No, what going back to, like, you mentioned earlier, or when we spoke earlier, like sacred healing. Like, this is what I'm also really excited to learn more about from your background in psychology and counseling and stuff as well. And a lot of guys want to deal with this as well, as like how to create healthy relationships with your body, mind, and commitment. Environment, rather, by commitment. Okay, like how do we start building that? Because that's something I'm massive on, is connecting all of that sort of stuff together. But I'd love to hear from your point of view and perspective how you go about doing that, or bring awareness to that. And because I know I always get the question from females, actually, like, how do I get my partner to be more self-aware when he's just not open to it? Do you have any sort of ways or bringing that to light for them?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess that like trinity of relationships that you just kind of touched on, like relationship with the body, or like the relationship we have with ourselves. And it's like relationship with with our mind, whether you're religious, so maybe your relationship with God, or if you're more spiritual, your relationship with energy or whatever it is. But it's like a relationship with something that's not you, not your partner, but something that's a little bit greater. And then it's that relationship with someone else in your life. So that can be like a romantic partner, it can be a friend, it can be a kid, it can be a parent, whatever it is. But it's like this, kind of think of it as like this Venn diagram of 3 kind of circles, and they all overlap in the middle. And where they all overlap in the middle is like, is balance, is healthy alignment, is being kind of, holding true to your integrity is that sentence. So like when one of those relationships gets either prioritized or overemphasized over something else, over one of the other relationships, then we create this imbalance. So for example, the like the gym scene and like the physical development scene and like functional movement and physiotherapy is like a really good avenue for guys to kind of enter into that kind of Venn diagram, because they start to work on their body, they start to become a bit more aware of like what's happening for them physically. But then a lot of guys can get stuck in that relationship with themselves. So kind of like working through, I work with a couple of guys who are ex-football players, and like they're really focused on just building up their muscles, right, and building up their body through CrossFit or through whatever it might be. So they become overemphasized in that relationship, and their other kind of two relationships kind of fall to the side, and they become unbalanced. Other guys that I've seen become really focused on their partner and focused on what's going on in that relationship, that they forget to take care of themselves. They forget to take care of their consciousness, or whatever their language is for it. And so they become unbalanced in that, because that takes up the majority of their space and time. And so they become unhealthily, overbalanced. So like the big thing is then starting to figure out, firstly, where or how you're dealing with each one of those three relationships. So is it a healthy relationship that you've got with your body? Are you doing do you have a morning practice? Are you eating right? Are you stretching? Are you doing yoga, or are you doing your gym work? Or is it, maybe, are you tight all the time? Are you feeling tense? Are you getting massages? Are you taking time out to kind of let your body rest? Understanding your relationship with your partner. Is it healthy? Like, is it, or is there something wrong? Do you not maybe know what that thing that is wrong is happening, or does it kind of feel like something's off? Or is it, or are you happy with it? Are you both engaged and healthily engaged? Are you doing personal development work with your partner? Are you both growing together? Is it supportive and nurturing? Is it challenging as well? And then developing or trying to understand what your relationship is with spirit, right? With source, or with energy, or whatever you want, whatever your language is for it, right? But that's like, we start to look at stuff like doing things for the community, doing things for the planet, like doing things for the sake of something greater than you and greater than your partner. So it's like connecting with something that's not so individual, but something that's a bit more collective. So are you volunteering somewhere? These are like real simple examples, but meditation can be one, connecting with God if you're a church goer, praying, whatever it might be. But developing that relationship and figuring out if you even have that relationship, or is it just yourself and your partner? There's nothing else kind of going on for you. So that's like, it's taking a stock take pretty much, like just writing a list down of being like, cool, here's my 3 relationships, or as I like to call them, your 3 sacred relationships, because everything we do in our life is interacting with one of those 3 relationships, right? There's nothing in our life that doesn't fall into one of those 3 categories. So it's like just putting 3 headings on a piece of paper, and then just starting to do a little bit of a stock take, a little bit of an inventory of how those relationships are going for you. And then, you might find that one relationship, you've got heaps and heaps and heaps of stuff to write on. One of the other relationships, you've got like nothing. And that might give you a bit of an indication that, I'm focusing more on this one, I'm a bit more prioritized on this one. And maybe you need to be at that time, but it's probably important and probably valuable to add a bit of time and energy into another relationship to bring a bit of balance to your life. And you'll find that majority of, from my experience, majority of guys are kind of focused on themselves or focused on their partner. Guys in the spirituality community are a bit few and far between, unfortunately. So that relationship with something greater than ourselves can be a bit lacking. But it tends to be a really important component of like relating to people, relating to yourself, relating to your partner. Because if you don't, this goes into a bit of yoga philosophy, but if you're not respecting yourself, and if you're not having a bit of a sacred relationship with yourself, treating your relationship with yourself as sacred, as something to be revered, as something to be cultivated, then you very easily fall into unhealthy habits, or you very easily let yourself slide, or you very easily just go, fuck it, I don't need to worry about what I'm putting into my body or how I'm treating myself. So it's like, if your relationship isn't respectful and isn't reverential, then it's very easy to just be like, you know what, I'm just not going to even fucking worry about it.
I love how you explain that. And I hope there's a lot of light bulbs going off for anyone who's listening, really, about having that balance, because that's exactly what I bang on about all the time. Because if you're neglecting other aspects, you still don't have that ultimate fulfillment or that holistic approach to who you are as an individual. I love the way you go about it, for sure. What so just before we finish up, and I'm going to ask you now, hopefully to put you on the spot, to come back on again in a couple of months, because I'd love to get a heap of questions from everyone who listens to this episode, to have almost like a Q&A from people, or we could even do it as an Instagram live potentially. But like, how do people go about getting in touch with you, like finding out, and like how do they? Because like you said earlier, you don't work with just anyone. Like, how do they find out if they're a good fit for working with you?
Yeah, cool. So I can be found on my website, my business website, which is www.kamawellnessperth.com, and that's KAMA Wellness Perth. And I'm also available on Facebook as well at facebook.com/Karma Wellness Perth, and Instagram at Cam Fraser 400. And I'm sure those links will be available.
Yeah, that'll be there.
I have a one-on-one coaching kind of practice, and anyone that's interested in maybe doing some work with me or has a couple of questions before they want to find out, if they're a good fit, I offer free 15-minute discovery calls. So people are more than welcome to jump onto one of those. It's got a really easy online booking system. They can just ask questions, maybe share a little bit about what's going on for them, figure out if I'm a good fit for them or if I need to refer them on to someone else. So obviously, like for example, if someone comes in and they're dealing with a lot of trauma, not something I work with quite a lot, so I'll transfer or I'll refer them on to someone who is a bit more of a trauma specialist. But if the coaching is the right fit for them, we can kind of discuss that. It's just a forum for them to ask some questions and feel comfortable just opening up the door for the conversation, really.
Awesome, man. I love how you've got integrity about it. If you don't feel that you're the right fit or vice versa, you'll pass them on. I think that I love that in a coach. I really appreciate that. Man, thanks so much for coming on. I've got a heap more questions on. We have to do a part two. Like it's a given. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to have questions, but I'll drop all the links in the show notes for everyone. And obviously, you know where to find Cam to get in contact and ask any of the questions. But thanks so much for your time, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, dude. I enjoyed it.